What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Things are getting interesting for November with a recent update on Nintendo's site for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Remake, Remastered, Reborn. We're still trying to figure that part out, but with this update, there's even some discussion around a potential date we could see, and yes, that would technically work to set up a pretty big showdown come November, but we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony, who's been in the news quite a bit recently, but now even going viral for a filing that points to a controller with no buttons. And then we do have Splatoon Raiders with some initial sales data getting out there, and go figure, it's doing very well in Japan, so much so that it's even boosting a now more expensive Switch 2 system, but we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoyed these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, going over the world of gaming news, trying to keep you up to date here on YouTube, but also here on Spotify, video and audio available there. So just know, even if you don't get a notification in the morning, there's probably a video here to check out. And we're going to start today with Xbox. Remember, all capital letters on that one. But they had their recent earnings, and it didn't go so well for Xbox. Still down like double digits in terms of console sales. And a lot of that's attributed to, yes, it is getting more and more expensive now, especially throughout this generation for these systems. They keep going up in price. So what's the next logical step? You start to think about removing the hardware technically from the equation. And I kind of mentioned that, hey, keep cloud gaming in mind, that term, over the next several years now. And, well, here we go. This from Asha Sharma saying, this summer we've expanded Xbox streaming to more than 150 million TVs and devices around the world because not everyone can afford dedicated gaming hardware. Today we're adding millions more through VIDAA-OS and Hisense, so more people can play on the hardware they already own. And yes, I know, dedicated gaming hardware, like, oh yeah, not everyone can afford the hardware that, yes, we've been increasing the price on, and I know it's memory and other constraints behind the scenes that have been going up in price. None of that's secret at this point, and everyone's raising their prices. But still, yeah, cloud streaming, guys, that I'm telling you, we're going to digital. That's like the big push right now, right? It's really not that much further from that to just streaming, because it's the mainstream, again, that's steering the ship right now. And if you really look into some of the cloud streaming right now, you might be kind of surprised with how it is, depending on your setup, because it's more responsive than I would figure it'd be, because I looked at a few of them recently. And if I'm thinking that, the mainstream's probably like, what am I even downloading this stuff for? So I think this is going to be a path forward for a generation coming up where systems are more than $1,000 at retail. Also, it looks like Assassin's Creed Odyssey saw a bit of a boost for player count because of the Odyssey, well, the movie from Christopher Nolan, that apparently is very, very good. I say apparently because I haven't seen it yet. Turns out these IMAX tickets are pretty difficult to get, and even there's an IMAX theater somewhat near me, it's like an hour away, and their projector or whatever wasn't even working. Like, they were trying to get it back up, and it's a whole thing there. But like we can see, this was shared by Reese Elliott for Alinea Analytics here, saying the Odyssey hit cinemas on July 17th, and the cultural spillover in the games was pretty immediate. Players naturally connected the film's classical Greek setting to Ubisoft's 2018 Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and it's a 90% surge, by the way, in engagement. More than 110,000 daily players were added because of this. That's super impressive. I mean, look, the Odyssey, again, people are saying it's like one of the best movies they've ever seen. Some are seeing it multiple times. Like, it's this like transcendent experience in, 70 millimeter IMAX. That's fine. But then it's also like, oh yeah, Ubisoft just kind of sitting over there in the corner, not really, just minding their own business, sees a massive surge. And I guess that's the power of Christopher Nolan and the Odyssey. Even makes you want to play a Ubisoft game. Oh, and we're about to talk about Ocarina of Time, we'll say Reborn. Well, there's another game in November that you may have heard of with GTA 6. Seems like they're also ramping up to maybe make a push for a new trailer or some gameplay. This we can see. This is posted by Ben over on good old Twitter X there, saying Rockstar made 2 back-end updates today, GTA 6 website, and then they go on to say that there was another update. So we had 3 updates over the past couple of days, almost like they are indeed preparing to have some more marketing, we'll say. Trailer would make the most sense. Remember, when they did the pre-order stuff, they just gave us a huge batch of screenshots, right? No, like, new trailer or anything. Nate also mentioned that August, that's when I would expect to see more. I mean, look, we'd also be kind of running out of time if we got all the way through August and there was still no new trailer. Oh yeah, and it's out in November. So Yeah, it makes sense in August. I would assume the first half of the month we'll see some new trailer. I'd like to see gameplay at this point. I think I've just seen enough about the cinematics and stuff for the game, and sure, in-engine, whatever. Let's see how the game actually plays since they've had pre-orders open for quite some time as it is. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Switch 2. We'll leave the titling up for now until we actually get the full reveal of it. Who knows? Maybe they just call it Ocarina of Time and that's it. Kind of like Star Fox is just Star Fox. I don't know how I feel about that. I think I need some kind of like subtitle or something underneath of it just to differentiate it a bit. But there was a recent update that people noticed and got very, very excited because this is something that, yeah, obviously you would have in preparation of the game coming out, but also in preparation, I assume, of some big marketing coming up, a trailer, maybe I don't know, like a 40th anniversary direct for the Legend of Zelda franchise. Well, this we can see. This is over on Nintendo's product page for Ocarina of Time. Yes, it is now rated by the ESRB E10+. Animated blood, fantasy violence, and the other thing with this, by the way, that I'm waiting for the conversation to start up, because no matter what Nintendo does with this game, and maybe that's why some of these bigger games from the past, these companies, these publishers, developers stay away from, there is going to be some kind of controversy coming out of this. Now, how manufactured will that be? That's a great question. We'll have to see, I guess, how stark the differences are. Yes, going from the N64, even the 3DS, to something like the Switch 2, based on the visuals they've shown us in the very brief trailer for the game, certain things won't be left up to your imagination any longer, and they have to decide how they're going to present it to you. I've seen people bring up things like the Great Fairies. Like, yes, those are going to look a lot different in this game, but even down to some of the violence that happens, which there's one part that I will say there's like blood getting thrown around, and when I was younger, I was like, whoa, that seems kind of violent for Nintendo here. Interesting. That was the first time I really saw a game like this, like really presented in 3D with the N64, but it was still somewhat shocking back then. They changed the blood color, I believe, to green in the 3DS, so I don't know if they'll go that route. Yeah, I think they'd get away with purple, maybe. I could see that, like a darker purple, potentially. Kind of like back in the day, Dragon Ball Z, when we would see like the most censored version of it on Cartoon Network or whatever, they made the blood like black or like scratches and stuff. And it was jarring when all of a sudden we switched over to a different cut when they started giving us like the Namek saga fully. And all of a sudden, like everyone was just bleeding. It was just red. It was like, whoa. So I don't know if it's going to be something like that for this game, but it wouldn't shock me, okay? There's definitely going to be discussion around the pros or cons for this game versus, go figure, the best rated game of all time on places like Metacritic. But what about that November release? Because that's kind of when I figured it would come out, and I think many other people were also lining it up for a November release, with maybe the Duskbloods coming out in October? Well, now we're starting to see some movement there as well for when Nintendo could have this game come out, and it's going to be interesting if indeed this does hold, because we can see. Now, this first popped up, I saw over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. They say Nintendo UK has listed Sword Kirby and Dragoon and Noir DDD and Hydra Amiibo for release on November 11th, going on to say that typically when Nintendo will release an Amiibo on the same day as a Nintendo published game, and they have nothing announced technically at this time for November, okay? So people were saying that when they go to it in a different time zone, all right, it will then also shift it over to the 12th. That is a Thursday, and I'm kind of thinking right now that is the most likely for this to happen. I sort of thought maybe they would go same week, just straight up, and say, you know, we don't care for GTA 6. Honestly, the week before would make sense, and that means we would have two big-time releases. I mean, just looking at Ocarina of Time, obviously, it's Ocarina of Time, so it's going to get that kind of interest, that kind of pull, just outright in gaming. But GTA 6 is a game people have been waiting for forever. It seems like it's going to be the most expensive game we've ever seen, certainly has the highest expectations for any game we've ever seen. So, I mean, I assume we'll look back on one way or the other as legendary releases, good or bad, would be coming up within a week of each other. And that's going to make November very, very interesting, because I mean, I'm all in on this. I think it is coming out in November. It would make a lot of sense just based on Nintendo's release cadence and kind of how I assume they'd set up their big releases to close out the year. I guess I can't rule out December, but that that first week of December is typically when you're right up against it and you just want to get it out for the year. I don't know if Ocarina of Time falls in line with that. This should be a celebration for Nintendo, and I think it's going to be a big deal for them when they do a 40th anniversary direct for The Legend of Zelda, where they talk about the movie and a few other bits and pieces there with merchandise and probably some weird off-the-wall things that we don't really see coming. But Ocarina of Time will clearly be the big banner, like the big banner announcement at the end with the release date, and I figure some gameplay or just a look into the game itself, maybe even a full-on treehouse for it. But look out for that, because I think that's also something we will see in August, and that's part of the ESRB rating is part of the reason why people were getting excited for it, because, okay, that's happened, everything's lined up. Let's get that direct going here, probably in the next couple of weeks. Next up, let's talk about Sony with a recent filing that went viral online, because Sony's already under the gun with all the stuff happening for their big push to digital post-January 2028, when they are moving on from significant manufacturing, we'll say, for Blu-ray discs for games. They'll still do reprints for games that have already released, but they're moving like 90% of their manufacturing capacity over to, I don't know, optical sensors or something, but not game discs. That's, again, the big push there. Well, when you see stuff like this pop up, which this is it's a patent that, to be fair, filed back in 2023, and it's had updates, but now it's most recently been like made public and put out there. And I mean, you can see an image here for it. VGC also did some coverage on this one. And it's, they say, according to the patent's description and accompanying images, the controller would have a large touchscreen covering most of its top surface where the buttons would usually go. The idea is that players would be able to customize where the D-pad, sticks, or action buttons should be positioned on the controller to best suit their personal taste, accessibility needs, or what best suits each specific game. It appears that players can also choose to resize the buttons or even remove some buttons altogether for certain games. This went crazy online because they're taking away our physical media. Next, they're taking away our physical buttons, even the joysticks. And look, I had a chuckle at that at first when I saw it, but one, I mean, it is a patent. It's like they'll do some weird and wild things. And sometimes, yes, it does materialize into a final product that you can go to the store and buy. We've seen it before. I mean, sometimes Nintendo's had patents where it's just a shape. It's like, hey, this is just a square. And then they update the patent later. Oh, that was the N64 NSO controller. They just had to show where the label was going to be for FCC or whoever else, right? That was the idea. And they showed it on the back of this block. But here, I looked at this controller and initially thought, man, would Sony really go the path of screens on the controller completely, and you just have some kind of haptic or tactile feedback for when you press down in different areas? The thing with a controller that I think is very, very important and might go under the radar for many people because it's just kind of second nature, you become incredibly familiar with that controller throughout the generation. The idea being you don't have to look at the controller when you want to play the game and you have to press certain action. If they're moving around buttons constantly for each and every game, you'll never become familiar with it and it'll always be different, right? So then you are actually looking down at the controller quite a bit, especially if it's a screen. It's just, to me, this doesn't leave R&D for the mainstream, but I actually think this makes sense for like an accessibility controller. You know what I mean? Like where you can have, they say resize buttons. Let's say you need to make the circle button really, really large for whatever reason for that certain game, or you have to rearrange buttons for just accessibility needs, right? For a person who's trying to play the game. I think that actually makes sense, and this would be a pretty cool product if they can figure it out. But for the PS6 controller, we'll say, the PS7 controller, no, I don't think that's going to be the case, but the technology could be interesting if they do fit it into something that would be used for accessibility. Next up, let's talk about Splatoon Raiders, because we did have some of their initial sales figures that were posted in Japan. We can see this. That is over on stall-based form for the Famitsu sales charts. And yes, Splatoon Raiders at the top, 474,684 copies. That's very impressive. Remember, this is on the Switch 2 specifically. Rhythm Heaven had a massive launch, but that was available for the Switch 1, and then technically for the Switch 2, right? Through backwards compatibility. Splatoon Raiders, guess what? Splatoon, pretty big in Japan. Go figure. But we'll get to some of the hardware sales that managed to push as well here in a moment. Rhythm Heaven, by the way, is number 2 with another 78,355 copies. Then Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. That has crossed now 1.5 million physical copies alone in Japan. Then we have Power Pros 2026-2027, Mario Kart World, Pokemon Pocopia, eFootball Kickoff, Minecraft, Goemon's Great Gathering, and then eBaseball Pro Spirit 2026. That Goemon title is ridiculous, by the way. It takes up like 3 or 4 lines. Okay, moving over to the hardware. The Switch 2 did jump, actually just about doubled, right? 50,168 units. So now they have crossed 6.1 million units there in Japan for the Switch 2. Remember, it is a bit more expensive than it was, a couple of months ago, even at this point. So still, Splatoon Raiders able to push Switch 2 systems at a higher price point. The PS5, 9,184 systems. The Switch 1, 7,167. And then the Xbox Series, 151, which, as sad as that sounds, is technically, 58 units up from the prior week. And this has been a pretty good run for Nintendo in Japan, but just in general with some of these, I'll say AA releases. A Splatoon Raiders, a Tamagotchi Life, a Rhythm Heaven. These are games that don't cost Nintendo crazy amounts of money compared to something like, you can say a mainline Splatoon, but also think of a big 3D Mario, or The Legend of Zelda, right? Like a next mainline one of those. And that's the idea with Nintendo is they do those games, but then they also have these titles that are able to sell on the branding, the IPs, and so on, and having a spin-off like Splatoon Raiders that, with PvE in mind, has shown to be quite successful. I think the game is very, very fun. I'm still playing it pretty much constantly when I'm able to, and it's still a good time. You know, I'm towards the end of the game, and level 40-something, and still enjoying it. So, hey, Splatoon Raiders, selling well. I have a feeling this is going to be easily multi-millions of units, especially as we get through the holiday season, and I'm sure it'll be one Nintendo will definitely brag to investors about at some point. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Gears of War E-Day, as there was an entire multiplayer presentation for this game and a ton of previews that went out. So we'll kind of go through some of this here, which you can see. Now, this is the multiplayer overview that they released. They did talk quite a bit about Horde Siege Mode. It's a 12-player PvE setup, 3 squads of 4, and they're all gonna have different objectives, all right? So you have 12 people running around, but in different teams, and they will work to help each other out. So if you cross paths with another team, you can actually help them with their objective and then keep moving, right? It's kind of everyone working together against, in this case, the locusts. So you do have mini bosses and major bosses that you'll come across, and the idea being everyone extracts at the end. There's 3 types of this Horde Siege mode, and it seems like they're kind of set up in how long it takes to complete each one. So you have Blitz, Siege, and Horde, and those are in order of how long. So 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. The controls have been reworked, though, for faster and more responsive movement. So they showed mantling, climbing ledges, vaulting, all of that is easier, because it's not necessarily just press A to do everything. They've kind of separated that out a little bit here, okay? The classes in Horde mode, Assault, Breacher, Marksman, Medic. They did also talk about PvP. So we have a PvE mode, and then we have PvP, okay? Team Deathmatch, Conquest, Demolition, and Crucible. This is a 4v4 with symmetrical style maps, and it sounds very much like more traditional Gears, okay? So you have the Locust versus COG. Visuals and presentation, by the way, looks awesome. Like, it looks super impressive. The Coalition going crazy here, really showing off even at times, and they go a little further and say there's no battle pass. Most of the cosmetics are earned through playing. I did notice they said most, so I'm sure there's going to be some kind of microtransactions worked in there, but no big battle pass. You have to log in at certain times and stick with it for seasons, and they just say you play the game, you earn stuff, and like that's it. There's no way to buy your way to the end or something like that, okay? Content will be added as they go along. The game is releasing October 6th, and there are multiple betas that will be happening in August. So you will have a chance to play the game beforehand. I believe the open beta is like the 3rd week of August. Then they'll have like closed betas and stuff leading up to that. So I think right now it looks awesome. I played Gears of War Reloaded. That one felt old. It did. Not that it's like a bad game. It's still Gears of War. But I definitely looked at it and said, okay, I think they could do a bit more with E-Day. And man, are they. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. When I look at Gears PvP, I'm definitely better at things like Halo and stuff, but I do have a lot of fun playing with a few other people like Nate and MVG and RGT and stuff when we go online to play Gears. And so I think E-Day hopefully will click with me a little more, just based on the mechanics and even some of the gameplay with shooting and stuff that they showed here versus Reloaded. So I am certainly looking forward to it. I think I'll be more PvP, but I did ask, hey, which one do you prefer, PvE or PvP in the poll? And that's what we'll take a look at. Which we could take a look at here. And yeah, PvE, 79% of people prefer that over PvP at 21%. I saw some people, though, in the comments say, hey, if you'd ask me, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, when I was younger, in my competitive prime for online play, I'd have said PvP. But now, you know what, I just like to kind of kick back and hang out with some friends and go through swarms of enemies, or even in things like Destiny, where I'm walking around completing objectives in the world, and I just do PvE. It's more relaxing for me. I get it. I mean, back then, yes, it would still be very serious, but I felt like you had more time to really just focus in on one game, player versus player, right? And that's it. But now, as you get older, everyone has different responsibilities. It's harder for people to get on like every single night. Whereas back in like high school or college, man, you were on every night. And that was it. Like you didn't have to go to work or deal with anything else for the most part. And it worked a lot better back then, I will admit. But I also am still a PvP fan over PvE, but I think that's still kind of just the old days of Halo calling to me. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as we're seeing here. This is from Shinobi, who says, but my PS5's box says 8K. Yeah, I mean, okay, that is still the funniest like marketing or advertising that I've seen, because now you look at it and go, okay, well, they obviously messed that up. There are some 8K games on the PS5, like the PS5 Pro does have some 8K games, but it's not a focus anymore. I don't see anyone talk about 8K. I remember even like TV manufacturers were trying to push it at one point, and I think I saw on Best Buy a couple years ago, an 8K Samsung popped up and it was $3,000. And I go, you know, that's not as bad as I would have thought at the time. Remember when plasma TVs were going crazy and you'd look and it was $5,000 or $6,000 for a 40-inch plasma, and I was like, this is the technology of the future. Even 3D TVs were eating the glasses. I said 8K, you know what, $3,000, and I think even at one point it was on sale for $2,500. All right, that's not as bad as I would have assumed for this newer niche product in terms of technology. And now I don't really ever see anyone talk about 8K. So I think most people are content with 4K. We've talked about how like diminishing returns are really kicking in gaming, but also I kind of feel like just in movies. I mean, talked about IMAX 40mm, like super impressive, but it's hard for me to even find one within an hour of driving distance. So yeah, I think most people pretty happy with what they have right now with 4K resolution. And it really just comes down to the overall screen quality. Is it like an OLED? Is it mini LED? Like, what do you have there? And I think that's more or less what the conversation is shifting to. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear about how with that recent Xbox outage, some of their physical discs got exposed for not actually being accessible like you would want a physical game to be. I did a whole video looking into that, and I'll leave it right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.